8 U.S.C. 1182. By which they predicated this executive action, and it couldn't be any more
clear. Which they ignore, by the way, in this opinion, really.
They totally
ignore it. Let me say something else.
Well, let me
the
put it up on the screen.
The Court of Appeals are the ones that created the constitutional crisis. They created the constitutional crisis.
Let me read it for our audience, if I can. When the president finds that the entry of any aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants, non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate. This is not...
Right.
The law could not be clear. It's not for a judge to make this decision. They do not have the constitutional authority to do this.
Yeah, the fundamental problem here is the district court judge and now the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, again, not shockingly, has created their own constitutional crisis. A showdown between the President of the United States as Commander-in-Chief under Article 2 of the Constitution and the statutory authority you just read, and the Ninth Circuit exercising their judgment instead of the President's. That's not the way the government is structured.
And the refugee program is a disaster. It's like playing Russian roulette. We are not vetting the refugees in any serious sense. We rely on the United Nations to do the core vetting, and then we run off of their files to figure out whether these people should be here or not. This is a dangerous game the court is playing. I guarantee you the terrorists in those affected countries are going to flood the refugee zone to try to get in here before any courts rule in Trump's favor.
Absolutely. And, you know, terrorists may be evil, but they're not stupid. And I've said fundamentally what the whole issue comes down to here, Jay, is the inconvenience of a few non-American citizens versus the willingness to gamble with the lives of the American people. And what the judges have decided here, and Democrats have decided, they're willing to gamble.
Yeah, well, but the Ninth Circuit has taken upon itself to decide that they are now going to override the President of the United States when the Constitution and the statute are clear. And you've read it multiple times, but there is no question about the statutory authority here. But let me add one other thing, and I think this is the fundamental aspect of this. This constitutional crisis has been established not by the administration, but rather by the District Court and the Court of Appeals. But the President can moot that whole issue out tonight by issuing a new executive order, meeting this burden, and then let them fight it out again. And that may be one way to resolve this. I trust the Attorney General's recommendation, advice on this, no matter which way it goes.
And Tom, you know, let's look at the practical potential consequences here. Because what they are is that, God forbid, somebody comes into this country from one of these 7 countries where we know they harbor terrorists, where terrorist training takes place, and even President Obama, the list actually came from him and his administration. If, God forbid, an American is killed, I am saying what needs to be said here. They will have blood on their hands. They will be responsible because they are not putting as their top priority the safety and security of the American people. Do you agree with that?
I agree, and you don't have to believe President Trump on this. Believe the appointees of President Obama, who over the last 2 years have repeatedly warned that the refugee program is susceptible to terrorist manipulation. They've warned it specifically about the Syrian program. They've worried people have already slipped in under the refugee program. So this is serious. And by the way, your listeners and viewers may not know this. Once you're a refugee here in the United States, you're required to seek permanent residency. This is a pathway to citizenship. This isn't a temporary refuge. If you're here, you're here forever, practically speaking. And this is something that we have no way of protecting the American people from in terms of the terrorist threat, because the courts right now have allowed or stopping the president from ascertaining whether someone is a terrorist threat from places like Syria, Yemen, and the worst of the worst.
All right, guys,
because these courts are in denial of what's really going on in the world right now. The Ninth Circuit's in denial, so is the district court judge. They live in a world they wish it was, not the world that it actually is.
The nation's
I would actually say it a different way. I think it's a pre-9/11 mindset. That's how dangerous this is.
It is.
Guys, stay right. Jay, stay right.
We're going to have to examine our legal options. That's what our counsel's office is doing now to make sure that we know what the best legal route to do is. But there's potential options. The president's fairly committed to this, extremely committed to this, rather, because he understands that this is what needs to be done to make sure that our country's kept safe.
Trump, ought to see the writing on the wall, abandon proposal, roll up his sleeves, and come up with a real bipartisan plan to keep us safe. I'm Jackie Ibanez.
With the American Center for Law and Justice. Also joining us now, syndicated columnist Michelle Malkin. Michelle, first, your initial reaction to this very predictable decision by this radical left-wing court, the most overturned out on the left coast.
I'm appalled, but I'm not surprised. And the phrase that Justice Scalia talked about, social transformation without representation, is ringing in my mind and ears, and it should across America. The idea that two liberal states, Minnesota and Washington, could step in on behalf of poor, moany universities that are inconvenienced because their foreign students can't get into the country somehow trumps President Trump's fundamental duty to protect America. It just shows you that judicial tyranny has run amok, and these men and women in black robes, as Mark Levin, our friend, has warned about for so long, need to be reined in. The American people no longer have a voice in immigration. The idea that there's a constitutional right for millions of people, whether they're refugees or short-term visa holders or legal permanent residents, to get into this country, it is destroying the foundations of our country.
Jay,
and our control.
Let me go back to you and the president's tweet tonight, which in big bold letters will see you in court.